Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Holy Wells Revival on this Wednesday, 12th of October 2022. And I don't have an intro video still. I'll get to it sometime, but thank you anyway for joining me for our weekly time of exploring holy wells and sacred pools and blessed water, exploring their water mysteries, the water well and pool traditions, and whenever possible, news of holy wells being restored. So hail, whole, and holy good health to you all. Now, through this edition, we're going to explore folklore and stories of witches at the wells. And I'll take me out of the picture for a second, I think. There we go. There we go. And that's what we're going to be going through. I don't have any guests today, despite invitations sent out, but I've got plenty to share with you today. So absolutely no problem with that. Holy Wells Revival and Nature Folklore sessions and videos and sanctuary support, they're brought to you due to the support of our kind subscribers. So thank you, subscribers, for your continued support. And if you can help cover the show's expenses, there's the Patreon link right there. And helping out with $1, pound, or euro more per month, it goes a long way towards keeping this show afloat, and the Sunday ones as well. But if you don't like subscriptions or using PayPal, which is what you do through the Patreon, you can go through the Buy Me a Coffee, and I have a revolving thingy here, a revolving banner. Let's get that up for a few seconds. There you go. And you just use the card with that one, and that gives the online address. So many thanks for your help and support. And I think, let's see who's joined us. There's one or two people on board. Kate Cloud Sparks is around, which is fantastic. Hello. Yeah, you made it to the Wednesday show at last. Lovely to have you on board, Kate. Wonderful. Thanks very much. I'm sure you won't be the only one. A few people will catch up as I carry on with this. So that's wonderful. I've just completed a 3-part series on nature folklore on Sundays. It was Witches, Cauldrons and Ales. And with this, I traveled through the culture of the ale housewife. And getting back to the photos, this is the sort of thing that I was doing with the ale housewife, who seems to have been first recorded way back in Mesopotamia. And that's a recording that's about 4,000 years old on stone that mentions an alehouse when it's translated out. So that's one of the things I've been talking. Anyway, on that series, I outlined the changing culture of the ale housewife as the culture moved west and onto what is now the UK, the Isle of Man, and Ireland. Now, ale housewives, they set up their homes in a picture. Oh, I'm having picture problems again. I've been having this on Sunday, so I'd love to get this up for you. Very humble homes anyway. They set up homes of their small breweries beside what we call holy wells today. I was going to show a holy well, but it's obviously not there. But I tell you what, I will show. There's several sites around the island called Full of Flower. There you go. There's a well there, and there's the trough, and you got the hearth there. I'm sure they're always talked about being used for cooking food, but I'm sure this was the earliest central part for brewing, because there are ways of capturing the natural yeast here, and there are various ways for the brewing, the boiling of the broth, going brain dead already. Not so much the broth, but what do you call it? The mash. Yeah, so that would have been going on there for the brewing. But as I say, a great aid around that site for aiding fermentation and the presence of natural yeast. Now, during 1,000 years of medieval Middle Ages, from the 5th to 15th century, the enterprise and legacies of these ale housewife women grew from their humble thatched huts, something a bit like this, and they grew from that into, right through the Middle Ages, from those humble beginnings into creating quite wealth-creating taverns. And also during this time, there was a growing power of Christianity being put upon them. And added to that, there was the addition, we're really going to the end of the Middle Ages, 12th century onwards, there was the creation of the feudal system, really put together by the boys' clubs of the time. They grew in size, very much the patriarchal boys' clubs, the guilds, and so forth. And here's a comparison of feudalism then and now. So that was something I put up. And it seems that many human cultures have found ways to punish women who are seen to cross the boundaries over into the patriarchal, that's set by the patriarchal gatekeepers of society. And I think that still goes on. Now, women, especially once in poverty, and going from poverty and heading into wealthy success, not from just brewing ale, but also from all kinds of brewing, distilling, and concocting brews to heal. There's a nice one to show off that. There's one and a concoction. And said to, was accused of enchanting people through telling folklore stories that enchant really with the morality of the natural world. But the women who grew crops baked for their families using natural sourdough yeast, made mash to create malt. I think there we go. There's that mash pot. I was looking for mash. There's a nice mashing pot going on there. And on addition to that, brewing ale and medicines. And through doing all of this, they took on, the locals really respected these women. These women took on quite a leadership in the community and also quite a mentorship, because they were the people that the village would go to, not only for the medicine, but for consultation, mediation when they got problems. Certainly advice, and really, it's like the counselor, the representative, the priest, everything. They just took the role of the go-to person with the community. I think I'll hide that one. But they were targeted by men who believed that it was their God-given right to keep all that power these women attracted from the communities, that the men believed it was their right to keep that power for themselves. And the retaliation by the patriarchal commerce guild churchmen was about to ignite and spread propaganda that these women brewers, these healers, the go-to people, the mentors of the community, they were actually in alliance with the devil. That was the thing they put over, something like that. And their only purpose was to enchant people to become bonded and enslaved to that devil character. So the word witch, it seems to be the melting of two Saxon words. There's pica, that comes from the Saxons, and that's an action of enchanting people. And the other one is weik, W-E-I-K, which describes someone bending over and moving their hips, a bit like this character here. And I suppose it could be interpreted in various ways. I don't know if week is referring to the motion of women stirring the mash, like I was showing earlier, or other thick concoctions like this woman here, or whether it was elder women and hags just by permanently bent over the pot. Maybe most of their lives, they ended up being permanently bent over. So maybe that was related to that. We just don't know for absolute sure. Right, so Stephanie, lovely to have you here. Nice to be here from West Virginia, United States. My first time catching a show, and I hope you'll enjoy this, find this interesting, and catch up with the other ones. There's not many in this series yet with the Holy Wells revival. It's splintered off from nature folklore that's been going on for about 3 years now, but this is going to have a lot more focus. So thank you for coming on board. Now, looking back, I'm going to take a wee drink here. Looking back on the spread of witchery, the propaganda of witchery anyway, it does seem to be entirely a sort of religious and commercial war. The men trying to protect and gather those interests for themselves. But it was also quite a war between the Protestants and Catholics, and the propaganda of witches and the whole fuss over witches, that was before the 30 Years' War. Worth looking that up. I won't cover that on this show. But I've heard it of being a revolt of the Protestant enforced Reformation during the 16th century. And this was to banish the power of Rome and the Catholic Church, especially over lands that were regarded as Protestant, especially over in Germany, because before that war, there was that cruel season of witch hunts that were the consequences of the witches' propaganda that was put out against women in brewing, healing, and commerce. And that witches' hysteria, it lasted about 200 years before that actual war broke out. And during which time there were 90,000 women that were killed, accused of being witches rather than essential brewers, healers, and teachers. And half of those women were in the Germanic territories, much of what's Germany now, and several more across other Protestant parts of Europe, including England, Wales, and Scotland particularly, and only a minority pockets here in Ireland. And I say a few pockets in Ireland because though most of what is now Ireland, what we call witches today, on this island, they really had quite a different meaning and interpretation to what they may have had in Germany, England, Wales, and Scotland. So having the equivalent of witch by a spring well, that was considered to be an honor for the woman. And I'm going to explain why lately. So for now, let's get back to the vision of the alehouse brewer women. To do her work, make her brews, she needed to be living and working by a good natural spring as her essential water source, a spring that we call a holy well now. Now, wells around England, Wales, and Scotland during the spread of the faith of Protestant Christianity from about 13th, 14th century, more and more people became convinced and believed that some of the natural spring wells were where the witches congregated. And I say spring wells because I don't think the concept of holy wells as a name came about until the orders of a famous Pope Gregory during the 16th century. You know, the one he invented and enchanted us into that crazy annual calendar that just about the whole world is now following. God knows why. Anyway, I'm going to dedicate another Holy Wells revival session to talk about Gregory and the saints and the way that the wells changed. It's a different subject altogether. But it does seem Pope Gregory's reasoning for establishing holy wells was to make them distinct from the wells that the witches were said to congregate around. Now in Wales, there's still wells that carry the words groch. Let's get back to my pictures here. Groch or ruch. Now groch, I'm pronouncing wrong. Whack or whack. GWRACH and WRACH. And I got a picture of one. This is the most famous one. Oh, no, that one's on Anglesey. I'm not sure the name of that one, but that's a witch's well, but I don't know the name of it. But there's a more famous one, and I hope I got a picture up of it. Let's see. You know, I got this one of the witches by a spring well. There you go. Well, I say witches anyway. It gives that sort of imagery. But picture I wanted to bring up is not here. Is the most famous well that's actually, and I hope I've got it. This is the most famous well that's in Wales. Now, give me a moment. It's funny. All the best ones are the ones that suddenly disappear off of my storyboard here. So I'm going to try and get this back for you because this is quite a very important well. Let's see if we got it. See if I get it up. Yes, I think this is it. No, that's not it. Yeah, this is the one I want to bring up. Right, let's try and get this one. It's there we go. That's probably the most famous witch's well. It's just past Holyhead, onto Anglesey. And that one is the Flin on Uach. It's the devil's witches well. It's just as you go onto Anglesey. And that's the most famous. A lot of people visit it. And I think I've got the front of it. You actually go through a door to get to it. I'm not sure if you can actually get through the door. There we go. That's the rock door there. That's the door of that one to get through to the well. Now, that well lost its witchery image during the 19th century because there was a drought. And And the local area was dry of water, and their only option was to go to that witch's well and get the water. And then everybody found that the water was fine. Nobody was being enchanted into spells and so forth. And that was their last available, reliable water source during that drought. And I think that's a lesson perhaps for all of the filled in holy wells that are around, certainly in Ireland and in many places today. We may definitely be so relieved to have them if we can get them flowing again when there are droughts. Now, back in the 60s, when I lived in Somerset, I visited a witch's well in the pretty Quantock Hills. And the story there was, let's see if I got a picture of that as well. Here we go. It's right on the top of the hill. You don't see the pretty parts down below. It's very wooded, actually. But there we go. The story was that people would not go to that well for about 200 years because they had a fear of meeting witches there. And the people prevented any of their animals going up, climbing up, then getting near there as well, for fear of the witches enchanting upon them and making them sickly as well. But it was told there was a man from Wales who eventually arrived, and he possessed the gift of being able to banish witchery spells and witchery spirits that were present at the well. And here he is. And the way he did it, apparently he had various rhymes. That's the sort of artist's impression, I think. He had various rhymes and verses. And whilst he was doing that, he would sprinkle salt. And then after his visit and the ritual, he told everybody the well was safe to use again. Go ahead, you won't be enchanted, you'll be fine. And it seems that this man, I don't know his name, perhaps there were other Welshmen, there was a skill of Welshmen or a trickery of Welshmen, I don't know. But they did same as other so-called witch enchanted wells around England and Scotland particularly. So after their visits and rituals, the people were not afraid to use them again. They thought, this man's really done it, all is well, we can go up to it, so can the animals. And that was after 200 years. Now, another bit of Welsh witchery that seems to have spread up through northwest England, through to Scotland, over to Northern Ireland, and then on to Donegal, was the tradition of women that were branded as being witches, but they were also the guardian of the wells. Even at wells venerated to be associated with Catholic saints. Now, I remember the situation when I visited doing well in Donegal up to about 2008. I think changes happened then. But before 2008, there was a woman there. When I visited, she was very strict. Here's the doing well. Here we go. There's a well guardian. I think that's no, this is doing well. I'm going to show you that. That's kind of been modernized with the extra stones and so forth. But before 2008, it was still a block like that, and it had the door on it, which you can see there. And if you see the stone there, a woman used to be sat there, always with a scowl, and she'd have the doors locked. And she'd always check that everybody followed the ritual instructions, the Hail Marys and the Our Fathers and so forth, and before handing them a cup and inviting them to drink from the well. Now, it's interesting, you got a combination of witchery there as guardians, and I'm talking about they had to follow had to do the circles and do their Hail Marys, etc. And really, something like that is very much in the sort of ritual pace, probably, of these old, I don't know if you call it religions, beliefs, or whatever it was. So perhaps they felt, they can do the Christian timing because it's in the same timing that we're familiar with. That's just guesswork on my part. But I think these well guardians were labeled witches purely out of rural legend. They wouldn't go around calling themselves witches, but they were actually women that were from quite poor traveller families, and they practiced well guardianship. That was where this picture come up. And the reason they hang around the wells as guardians is they could beg for a few coppers, a few coins for themselves. Being a poor traveller family, that's what travellers used to do. So they made themselves be the guardians of the wells. Even so, these wells, they were very precious to these travelling families, and they didn't want anybody, it wasn't just for the money, they just didn't want anybody to mess them up. The water source is what they depended on. There we go. These by the well. That's a very old vintage photo. Sorry that that's kind of fuzzed over, but the water source they depended on for themselves. They were travelers after all, and also they believed and depended on the life spirit vibes that came from the wells. So they were guardians because they fancied a few bob, but a few coins, but they were there as a protection as well because it was so important to them. All right, let's see. A couple of comments have come up. Claire's nearby, learning so much, John, about witches. Thank you. And Cliff Carr's around a bit late, but made it. Very nice that you're here. Lovely to have you on board, Cliff. As always, thanks. Thanks very much for all of you that are keeping up with this. Appreciate it a lot. Now, from time to time, I talk about women that stare into the well water for visions. And that's usually linked to trying to see who's going to be their bonded mate in the future. And this water divination by these women was also said to be mentored by these women, by these well guardians. There's some people call well witches or just simply well hags. Now, these elder women would guide the young women staring into the well water to give them some clarity of their visions. And here we go. And this is actually, some people might be familiar with this, but there's a woman staring into the Wayside Well, which was the original Bridget's Well outside of Kildare. Most people are familiar with the Tully Well. I won't go into this. Yeah, I'll go briefly into the story. What happened was the main road, there was a main road that went past this well, and so many people congregated around this original well that the council decided it was too dangerous for this well to be advertised as the Bridget's Well, even though it was the original. So there was another well in a field, and they said, let's make that the official Bridget's Well, just for safety reasons. And that's why people go off to the Tully Well now, and that's their favorite Bridget Well. But what's happened is that main road has disappeared long ago. It's gone off in another direction. So this is perfectly safe to go into, very quiet. It's on the edge of the car park of the Japanese Gardens outside of Kildare. So it's a lovely place to go and stare in the water, just like this lovely woman there is doing. So anyway, looking into the well water, try and add clarity. And as I say, the elder woman, the hag, the well witch, the well guardian are there because they're counselors, as I mentioned, and they would help women staring into the well water to help them add clarity of meaning to their visions. A bit like some people that help other people interpret dreams, I suppose, because it's all about visions. So any of those vision-seeking women, some of them, there is a tradition after our Gregory, our Pope Gregory of the 16th century. The tradition was to stare in the well on the eve of May Day, on April the 30th, but women would hope to see a vision of their partner. That was one of the times. The other time was Imbolc. But if they stayed on after midnight, going into May Day itself, and take a little water home, then that was said to confirm their visions, attract their eventual mate, and protect them from meeting any ugly enchanted men that are ugly, that are enchanted with nasty behavior. It's supposed to have protected them from that. So bear in mind that May Day, as I say, comes from the calendar of Pope Gregory that was released upon us during the 16th century. So that's a kind of in relation to these traditions, that's a fairly modernish one. Now, I don't know if these traditions actually did come from earlier sidereal timed Bildner traditions. I doubt it, because due to the calendar and the new Holy Well doctrines that were released in the 16th century. And at the end of the 16th century, when Gregory messed around with stuff, it looks like old traditions were mixed in with the new Christian orders, and so practiced interpretations from then on. They've been quite corrupted, and then they got corrupted again through the 19th century, through the Celtic Romance years. Now, again, as you can imagine, all of this well-visioned stuff, especially during the eve of today's May Day date, is or was part of the traveling and gypsy tradition. And I don't know. When I was a lad, every time you saw a gypsy or a tinker or a traveling person, they always had something to offer that started off with "cross my palm with silver." There's an artist impression of that. Usually it is palms to tell your fortune with a palm. It can be with a crystal. It can be with the water in a well, water in a bowl. So there's that, I think, well, a lot of what I've been talking about came into that "cross my palm with silver" stuff. As I was saying, the permission at the wells by these hags was literally "across my palm with silver," and you get a drink of the well water. Anyway, these well water guardian mentor hags, they were also present at some Scottish wells right up until the 1960s, I think. And then the Isle of Man, very big on the Isle of Man, the wells there. And they had a lovely tradition there where the witch guardian would actually sell wind. Yes, wind from the well. What they did was they sold wind to sailors because in those days their boats didn't run on diesel and coal. They ran with wind. They depended on wind. So these guardians, they sold them wind. So how did they do it? Well, at the well, the witch guardian would have lengths of wool thread, and they would put the wool thread into the well and soak them. And there might have been a ritual verse to go with it. And then these 3 wool threads would be tied into the knot, and they would sell it. Cross my palm with silver for the sailor's knot of this wool. And the sailor would take off these 3 lengths of thread that has been sacredly knotted by the guardian of the well, by the witch. And then on the boat, should the weather be still, no wind at all, the sailor would pull out a thread of the knot because that was said to bring on the wind if the water was too calm. So I don't know how successful that was, but fishermen were said to have bought the same thread knots to get the sea. Also, they bought these if they want to improve the fishing. And it said when they untied the knot, supposing the water was still, they didn't know where the fish were. It said if they took one of those threads, unknotted it, then the water would start moving and the shoals of fish would huddle around in an area, and so that caused easy, abundant fishing. So I tend to wonder, anybody familiar with Breed's Head outside of Wicklow? Beautiful place there. The well has only been discovered a few years ago, and I think it was due to me falling in it. A lot of people have been looking for it, and I was looking for it, and I fell in it. Anyway, I don't have any photos of it, unfortunately, but it's a beautiful place to go in Wicklow. And the tradition was that the fishermen, before they set off from the Wicklow harbour, would go and visit this well to pick up the water. Now, I'm wondering if that well actually practiced what I just told, where there was someone there, a guardian, that sold the fishermen knots so that they would have the sea move and create shoals of fish. But what happened after then, they collected the well water, took to the boat, and they would scatter it over their fishing boat to enhance their safety when out fishing against heavy weather. So that's that. Is there any more comments, any questions, anything you'd like to state from what I've said so far? I'm moving along quite well, I think. As I say, thank you for going through this with me. It's fantastic. Now, let's consider Ireland's most common approach to possible well witchery at holy wells. Now, Ireland's folklore is, as you well and truly know, is full of stories of the kayak. Now, I say kayak because that's what I was kind of brought up with. I'll tell you why. Some say kayak, some say kayak, cock. So there's all kinds of pronunciations of it. I think kayak seems with the new age crowd is more the popular one. So let's see. Let's get a picture of her. There we go. There's an artist imagery of her in the darkness there, and some people, they might call her the Celtic witch, as her stories are also in Scotland and the Isle of Man. And this is a kayak well. That's actually the Glen of Lion in Scotland there. And there's the kayak stone there. Or kayak, as you might say. Now, very full of kayaks in the Isle of Man stories too. Now, it's also said that within the mountains, she would rule all of the land between Sawan and Savan until Bilton, and the time when the land is at rest, it's regenerating itself and restoring itself through from winter to spring. Now, kayak is said to be it's said to mean the builder of mountains, and scholars jump all over me when they say that, for saying that. She's horrible, it doesn't translate as that. Anyway, I'm sticking to that for the moment. So that there you go. I love that imagery there. That's inside a cave. Artist was really full on with that one, wasn't that? But what I'm telling you, that's the tales I heard in Scotland anyway. But the general acceptance of the kayak is the old wife, as well as being the goddess of the cold and the winds through the winter. Now, I said that she determined the length of winter and its harshness as well. So, of course, we have to behave, otherwise we're going to get a harsh winter. Now, in Scotland, when there's a sea swell, every time there's certainly in the Hebrides anyway, lads will come into the pub and they say, the kayak's dancing on the sea. So they always said that she was the blame when they couldn't go out on the boat. She would, the kayak's dancing on the sea. We can't go out with the boats today. So, but also in the pubs, when the lads talk about their wives in the pub, my part of conversation in the pub is, how's your missus doing? How's the old girl doing? That type of stuff. In the Hebrides, it's how's your kayak doing? And that means the missus, old woman, etc. Or does it mean how's your goddess doing? Anyway, the stories of the kayak being at the wells in form of 3 women, and I pretty much brought that one up. Let's bring them up again. There we go. After the names of Bev, Macha, and Faye. And they're said to be 3 goddesses of the earth, fire, and air, who are all together there by the water pool. And from there, the 3 hags, the stories go, there's various stories around this. They lure weakened men that visit the well, especially around Sawan, into a nearby hill or mountain. And there, the 3 hags, they turn into the one complete goddess, who... and with that man, then 2 things happen. Either they arrange for that weak man's spirit to be transported to Tirnanog by the she horses, or if the man sleeps with a kayak through the winter, that man, through being there right through the winter with her, he would have his youth and stamina returned, at least by the spring. Now, I'm not going to share the complete story of that because I know that would take me at least a half hour to actually explain that whole story of that. But anyway, one interesting book is, if you can get hold of a copy, there's various translations to make it simple to read, is the Yellow Book of Lycan. It's a medieval scribe book of tales. And that book there, one of the tales it tells is, it's where you get... the Torn is in that one, the famous Torn, Maeve and the rest of it. But there's a story in that of a witch queen who, every Sawan, she marries the High King of Tara. And it was very central to these Sawan celebrations at Tara. Now, I don't know how a well plays into that tradition, but if people who've been to Tara, and if you go there, you'll find there's quite a few holy wells scattered around the hill, most famous being the White Cow Well, because that's the one that seems to be most active. But the one thing about people on this island, the Snout Island, they've long believed in the She and the fairies and similar divine beings and spirits who visit from another dimension, world, or even a parallel realm. Now, this belief may have remained in the presence of the people on this island right since the Tour de Donum. And because the people here have that powerful connection in their psyche, it may have been why no Christian order has been able to successfully spread the propaganda of local hags and brewing and healing women as being witches, as being in alliance with Satan. It just didn't go well because the psyche is deep enough to translate. You're just talking rubbish. That's what the English talk about. So, yeah, it just didn't wear. So in most areas of Ireland, the Irish never had the motivation to believe in and persecute women as being witches. It only happened in certain pockets where the Church of Ireland was pretty strong. And the reason being, and I'll repeat that, there were people on the island who constantly believed in the presence of magic, and that magic was usually for good and that magic for good, it would come through the hags, the she, and the little folk magic. But as you probably heard in other stories, don't mess with the fairies, don't mess with the she, don't mess with the hags, otherwise you'll upset that bit of good that comes through. But the air in Ireland is filled and ruled by this psyche for everyone's survival, and especially the well keeper women. Let's see if I can get another well keeper option up. People like this. Oh no, that's not well keeper women. They believe that the holy wells are due to the choice command of the she and the fairies. Anyway. I think I'll move on to comments before I get to the next bit. Someone's commenting, Stephanie, lovely, so beautiful. Thanks very much. Thank you. Right. Now, let's go on to something else. I was actually hoping for a guest to be on the show from the Galway Holy Wells Audit, as they call themselves. It's part of the Galway County Heritage Office, to be with us this evening, because after I talked about witches at the wells, I was hoping to talk a little bit about some wells in County Galway. But I didn't get any response, unfortunately, to messages that I sent. They're not on the social media, which is very surprising. Maybe when they got their results in from their audit, there'll be something on the social media, but they've no interest in that whatsoever at the moment. So I never got any response. But I'll be coming back at this time next year. And when I talk about Galway then, maybe I'll try a few phone calls with them. I do know some people who know them, and I'll have a word then. So we might get them on between now and then. But there's one thing. The thing is with this Holy Wells Revival show, it's still quite new. I've just been running it for a few weeks now. So for a lot of people, especially if they're well established in these projects, they might think that this show is a bit too young to be of any interest to them. So maybe next year be better. I'll just keep going with it. And I will post after the show, I will post a link to the Galway's World Project, the audit. It's fascinating. So I'll put it in the comments afterwards. Now, my own Galway Wells visit, I'm not exactly a great example with this. I love to visit the Holy Wells in all the different counties, but I've only got a photo record of visiting 6 county Galway wells that I visited. And altogether, they've got a big job in their hand, because on the archaeology.ie site, they show 320 holy wells listed in County Galway. So after being at 6, it's got a long way to go. Now, the Galway Wells Audit, they actually want to go beyond the listing that archaeology.com do. They won't go beyond listing. And they're trying to get into collecting stories about each of these county wells, and also to establish which of the wells of that 320 is functioning. Usually it'd be about 100 to 150 that are still functioning, about a third of them. And at the same time, how many of those can the public get to? So that's the sort of thing they want to establish. Anyway, I'm going to move on. And since we haven't got any County Galway people, and I'm not going to show any pictures of my visits at the moment, because I want to finish this off. So and move on with the witches by the Welsh folklore. Let me tell you about one famous alehouse brewer. You might have already read about this. The probably most famous alehouse Welsh witch hag in Ireland, and that's Biddy Early of Fecal in Clare. Let's get an artist impression of Biddy up now. We'll get on to Biddy. This is Biddy Early. Now, if you're into Eddie Lenihan, he tells a lot of stories. Look it up on YouTube, Eddie Lenihan. I think he's got a podcast on Spotify. If you look around, you'll find he's got a few storytelling sessions on Biddy. Fantastic story. I'm going to get touching on it this evening. And I'd love to go into her area and find out more myself, because I'm fairly limited on the Biddy information anyway. But Biddy Early, she was famous for brews, tonics, and cures. and I had some picture that's vanished on me. So give me a moment. There must be something here. Let's see if I can get another biddy. I've lost some of my biddy photos. It'd be nice to get that one. Biddy's tonics. Let's get that one up. Right. Here we go. I'll show you that one. There you go. That's another artist's impression. Notice that black bottle. That's very significant. And that really looks like her cottage, which I'll show you shortly. And she was just as famous for that black bottle and various black bottles as she was for the potions she made, because she would store these, and there was all sorts of stories about what's in those bottles. And Eddie Lenihan goes to town on that. Is sort of the punchlines of his stories. But Biddy Beam, she was very vocal. Of course, she was local to where she was. She was very vocal, and she lived a life that she decided that she was going to live because she was so engrossed in the land and what was around her. She loved people and supported people, but she was in constant conflict with the church, the laws of the land, the local constables, and especially the law courts. And also in conflict with other people practicing healing, especially the men who called themselves doctors at the time, and felt challenged by her. Now, Biddy, she was born in 1798, close to Limerick, and she came from a very poor family, and she became orphaned. Both her parents, I think, died off before she was 16. And out of that, she got married for the first time at 18 years old. And the man she married was much older than her, I think almost double her age. But together they bore a son. But unfortunately, both her and her husband, both her husband and her son, both tragically died very soon after, a couple of years after they got married, I think. But her husband had had a son from a previous marriage, and his wife had died. So in the end, Biddy actually married her stepson. He was younger than her, but he didn't live long either. So Biddy claimed that all of these deaths were caused by the fairies taking their lives, nothing to do with the medication, because she believed very strongly in the changeling, whereas the fairies took a fit baby, fit child, especially a boy, a man, took him off to fairyland, replaced with a sickly child. She believed in that very strongly. Now, eventually, Biddy did marry again. It was 10 years later. Again, she married a much younger man. And that marriage actually lasted for 20 years. And then after that long-term husband died, so he was the first one that didn't just die off in a couple of years. He just died off, I think, naturally. But at 80 years old, Biddy got to 80 years old, she married for the fourth time. And she married a man 40 years old, half her age again. But he didn't live long into the marriage. So that one of 20 years was definitely different. But to date, she's 6 years old. Biddy eventually passed away herself. That was in April 1874. Now, during those 86 years, through at least 70 of them, Biddy worked by sacred wells and shared a magic. Now, this is quite confusing because it's difficult to know if the wells exist. Now, there is one on Scattery Island. This is said to be a Biddy well. It's on Scattery Island, which is on the Shannon estuary. So she wouldn't have been too far from that. But that's the only one that I can come up with that she's associated with. I'd love to go to Tulla, that area, and find out a bit more about Biddy. But there's no holy well listed for Fecal where she was born. And on the archaeology.ie site, I'm not sure where her well was at all. Though there was a well that became rebranded as a spa nearby Tulla in Clare. There's quite a bit of storytelling of that. And that was where Biddy became very popular. But if you look on the maps, there's no record of any spa. There's just the stories of them. So I'd love to go to Tulla and look into this closer, ask some of the people there what they know of the spa of Biddy. Now, it's interesting calling a spa because the last edition of Witches, Cauldrons and Ale, I mentioned how the church, who were wary of the holy wells, the Protestant church, they would allow them to be renamed as spas, as a health thing, because they were spas of that nature were incredibly fashionable through the 19th century. So, and of course, Biddy was right in the beginning of that. So, anyway, there is a holy well by the church in Tulla, but I can't see Biddy being one to use that one. There's also a site called the Well of the Little Basket that's between Feakle, where she was born, and Tulla. It's a little townland called Glendree. But it's a distant guess from me whether Biddy used that. I'd have to be in the area, ask around for that. But the Spa of Tulla is said to have become a very popular pilgrimage site for a while. But I'm not sure through which years it was. But it was prompted as the place to visit and meet the fairy witch Biddy, is what they used to call her. There she is. There's the fairy witch Biddy with a crow this time. Another artist impression. Now, through life, Biddy would have clearly been interpreted as a witch by the well, by the English, Welsh, and Scottish. And she was actually charged with, they weren't burning witches in the 19th century, but she was charged with witchcraft in 1865. Now, I don't know what her punishment was, but it seemed to be how she was charged with witchcraft. And as I was saying, the spas were very much in passion. So suddenly it was all the rage to go off to Biddy's spa to meet Biddy, the fairy witch, and to be guided by her to healing. So what a turnaround then. I think it was after her trial, as I say, that spa anyway. Now, throughout Biddy's life, the church did try to close her down with whatever she did, with whatever powers they thought they had to try and wield it onto Biddy, get her closed down. Just didn't happen. And also the church tried to stop Biddy's folklore from spreading all her sheet and fairy traditions, especially by the wells, because the church was believing that these wells that Biddy was going around, she was just taking away the holiness away from them, that she was making the wells unholy, and the church wouldn't have anything to do with that. Hence, they accepted her having a spa. You know, spa's okay. That wasn't messing things up as far as the church was concerned. So I think through dialogue, that's why she ended up with a spa as the well she was with, rather than a holy well. Anyway, it was an impossible task, as much as the church tried, especially the Church of Ireland, impossible task to turn local people against Biddy, because people believed in Biddy's folk cures and also the similar work of other wise and hag women. Now, if you can, as I say, I was going to show, if you're in Clare at Feakle, there's a cottage. It's been preserved. You can go and visit that there at Feakle. Also, try Google search, as there's plenty of articles about her linked there. As I say, look for Eddie Lenihan on the YouTube and podcasts. Also, his website as well is probably linked up to them. All right, I'm going to have a look at your comments here after all that sort of waffling there. Now, there we go. Where did the term old Biddy come from? Why that's a good one. Hen and chickens called biddies. The other thing with Biddy, what's it short for? Because there's various biddies similar to her. She wasn't the only Biddy. Various islands had biddies, and it's a similar story. It's almost like it's a description of a rebellious woman. What's it short for? I don't know. Beatrice, or I'll have to look that one up. But where I first came across Biddy was in folklore, in Galatians folklore, like the Mummers plays, like the Straw Boys, Run Boys. And certainly in Yorkshire and in Fermanagh, Northern Ireland, Scotland, the Biddy was the person who was like the MC of these folk drama plays. And the Biddy was the one, she would open up the circle for the performance to take place, because it being a sacred circle, you do the performance. But it was the Biddy that when the performance was done, that collected the money, crossed my paths with silver. So that's the first time I came across a Biddy. So it was like sort of I'll relieve you. I'll give you healing, but please give me something in return. In the old days, wouldn't care so much for the money, but she'd appreciate a bit of food. Even though she baked bread, she would like some vegetables. I think. Well, I wouldn't be surprised. Other people's distillations, I'm sure, went down very well. Anyway, Cliff's saying something like that. Biddy derived from that. That's what I'm thinking. Betty Elizabeth is what I'm thinking. That's where it comes from. You know what that means, don't you, Cliff? That your Lizzie is a biddy. So over there, there's a biddy at the moment. There's the Prime Minister of the UK, and so definitely, and so and she's with a sort of Irish roots husband anyway. Biddy come from? Let's see what we got. Have I said? Have I missed anything out? There we go. Cliff saying, is there any lessons to be learned from with Biddy? Don't marry her. Yeah, because I suppose some, not a very good history, except what was the secret with the one who lasted 20 years? And it's so funny when I tell that story. I'm not going to tell of a person, but there was a nurse, a district nurse. She became a very good friend on the Isle of Mull in the Hebrides. And it's funny, her story is quite similar, but I'm not going to go into it. Anyway, not as bad as that, but well, it's funny when I tell that story, I kind of think of her. Anyway, I'll thank you for supporting these Holy Wells Revival and Nature Folklore sessions. Brought to you by the support of you lovely subscribers. If you can help cover this, as I say, pound, euro, or dollar a month goes a long way when you collectively help out, keeping the show afloat. And if you don't like going through the Patreon, there is this other one. Get the there we go, the Buy Me a Coffee. Just use a regular card on that one. And so many thanks for your help and support for keeping this going. I'll just tell you what's coming up as well. The 19th of October, I don't have any pictures for this, but I got serpents at the wells and holy wells of serpents at wells, and I'm going to look at some wells in Scotland if I've got time for that. And on the 26th of October, it's going to be ghosts. Of course, we're getting near to the Halloween one time, so 26th of October, it's going to be ghosts at wells. And if with what time I got, we'll look at holy wells in County Limerick. And on the 2nd of November, hopefully I'll be getting an author interview. I haven't got anyone lined up, but it'd be lovely to have an interview with a Holy Wells, Sacred Pools author or writer. So I hope we'll get that set up for the 2nd of November. And now coming up on Sunday on Nature Folklore, this Sunday, it also ties in the two of them, doesn't it? Because on the 16th of October at 4 p.m. Irish time, it's going to be Serpent Folklore at Sawan. And of course, on the Wednesday, I go on to Serpent at Wells. So that's lovely. Let's see. There's a couple more comments have flown in, which is lovely. Shane Brock. Bridget usually. Good one. Thank you for tuning in, Shane, and correcting on that. Lovely. Yes, that makes sense. Thank you. If you've... I'm glad he's here. And whilst he's here, Shane Broderick. Look him up. Can you put this down, Shane? Your website. I mean, I talk about Eddie Lenihan. Shane is incredible for the stuff he comes up as well. And he's put me right a few times and said, that's a load of BS. How about this? And it's lovely to see what he's saying, what I've picked up. It's a lovely resource. So please put that down, Shane. That'd be fantastic. Thanks. There we go. Stephanie McLemore. I greatly appreciate you doing the show. Very interesting, fascinating information. Thank you very much. And thank you. I've enjoyed being with you this evening to share the Holy Wells Revival. And I hope we'll have live guests to share with us during these approaching weeks. If you're watching this after as the saved broadcast, as an archive video, please keep your comments going because I do return from time to time to keep with the answers. So Click the bell icon if you're looking on the YouTube. It is a young channel. The Holy Welsh Revival was a very young channel, so not many people going through it much at the moment. But if you are, subscribe to that and tells you what's coming up. So it just leaves me to wish you a wonderful, safe week, or basically you on Sunday anyway. But I hope your days are full of wonder, inspirations, enchantments that comes especially with the presence of water. And so until next Wednesday or Nature Folklore on Sunday, play well. That's all I got just now. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone, and many thanks. Thank you. Right, and I haven't closed it properly because that's my bye-bye banner. Thank you. Oh, the bye-bye banner's not coming up. There we go. Hey, tech issue at the end. How about that? There we go. Thank you for watching.